Whenever you hire someone, you're hiring a stranger. Usually, the odds of getting that right are small, but are there ways to raise those odds? Well, my guest today is a recruiter who helps small businesses hire better, and she's got some tips to help us out with that. I'm Carl White, principal at Market Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of PracticeCare. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Usually that's what they want anyway. But everything's better when the practitioners own the practice. Everything from the care decisions they can make, the scheduling they can do, they don't have to double book, for example. Everything's better when the provider owns it because they have the most freedom to make the choices they think are best for you. It's just not the same when somebody else owns the practice. Usually, eventually, their agenda starts to creep in. It's not unusual. It can cause some challenges for the providers. Let's just keep it simple and keep it private. My guest today is Lindsay DeLee-Arel. As the business owner of BizMatch LLC, Lindsay leverages her expertise in event planning and customer relationship management to create and facilitate successful matches between businesses and people. Lindsay has over 10 years of experience in social media, community outreach, and client relations in various industries throughout healthcare and nonprofit organizations. Her mission is to provide customized and personalized solutions that meet the needs and expectations of clients, whether looking for new opportunities, partnerships, or talent. Lindsay has a master's in nonprofit management from Spertus Institute of Jewish Studies. Lindsay, I know you're busy with hiring. It never goes away. So thank you for carving out some time to come on PracticeCare.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
And it's good to see you again. We've known each other for a while. It's been a bit of time. Life sets in, so it's good to use this as a way to catch up anyway.
Absolutely. Like a
Yeah.
play date.
What's that? Like a
Like a play date.
like a play date. Exactly. That's sometimes people misname podcasts for play dates. So
Yeah,
good catch.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Um, Regular listeners are going to know where I start. We're going to get into the topic, but first, that was a short bio, but that's what I asked for. So help us get to know you a bit better.
Well, I was born and raised here in Chicago, and I've always worked with people in some way or form.
Hmm.
Um, and building relationships and making connections, and that became my job, doing business development in the healthcare realm, which I got into because of my grandmother, who was an administrator for 55 years in a skilled nursing.
Wow.
So I followed in her footsteps in a maze.
Hmm.
And I know the most important thing in any business is having the right people,
Hmm.
working with you.
Hmm.
And I believe I'm pretty good at it. Reading people and understanding the wants of people, but also the employer side. So I got into recruiting about 6 years ago and started my own business with the help of my husband pushing me a little bit about 2 years ago, and it's going great.
That's great. And is it all healthcare or like mostly healthcare or some or?
I do mostly healthcare, but I'll dabble in other things because hiring in itself is a continuum.
Hmm.
It's just learning the other pieces on each side.
Sure,
Uh,
sure.
but people are all the same but different.
Yeah, understood. Yes, yes. As a population, there's similarities, but individuals are just massively different from each other.
Right.
Yeah. And what types of healthcare? Like lots of.
I dive into anything like a clinic. I can do anything under the healthcare umbrella except the hospitals because they have their own.
Yeah,
They're too hard to get into.
yeah.
Um, but skilled nursing facilities, independent livings, private practices, eye clinics, dental clinics, I'm anything.
Anything. Good for you. Okay, good. So let's get into it. And the first question is, so the statistics, no matter what statistic you want to find that says what's the success of hiring, they're really bad. I mean, they're either sort of bad or really bad, but they're all on the bad side of the spectrum for years, decades. Why is that?
I think people present themselves in a way on their resume.
Hmm.
The hiring people have a expectation.
Hmm.
They have to check their boxes, and then they get to the person and it looks great on their resume. They go through their interview process and they aren't
Hmm.
really screening the people. They pass the initial test and they say, okay, You fill that salary box, which, you're in
Hmm.
our whatever that is, and you're great. Let's hire you. And then it gets to the point where they're like, oh, they can't really do the job because it was just they didn't read in between the lines. Um,
Hmm.
and the references people put down are people that know them. Might not, you
Yeah.
check the references of the references.
Yeah.
Um, and I think people need to hire quick a lot of
Hmm.
times, and they just go for, top three, and we'll narrow it down to this one because whatever reason they chose. A lot of times it's the money.
Yeah.
Um, it fits into the budget. So, they spend all this time and money on hiring, but usually it is the wrong person the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. You talk about references in particular. When I was prior part of my career, once in a while we'd have to hire somebody and I was forced to check references. And I'm like, but we know these are the best foot forward, as it should be, but they're not going to tell us it. I mean, it's a waste of
Right.
time, but I was forced to
Right.
do it, you know, total waste of
Yeah,
time.
it is. Like, I call references all the time, and I'm like, the first question I ask is, "What is something bad you can tell me about this person?
And they don't
Like,
want
is
to do
there
it.
anything negative?"
Yeah.
No, no. Well, of course, there's like, is there something they can improve on? No, they're great. Okay.
Yeah.
Take your word for it.
The one question that always sounded interesting to me is if you could hire him back, would you? And you really got to read the answer. Like if
Right.
they say yes, but there's a pause. If there's any, you know what I mean? Like you're like,
Yeah, a
there's
long
something
pause
there.
before.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Well, why? And then they want to answer. Anyway, so that's why the stats are higher so bad. They kind of move quickly. The heart of, I mean, what I took for the heart of your answer is they're just not looking for the right things. Like the
Right.
money piece is not you'd be good at this job. You know, the money
Right.
piece is that it's funny. I was about to say we can afford you, but you can't afford them if they're bad
Right.
because then they're going to be more expensive. You're going to leave and then you got to hire anyway. So yeah, so there's just so these are, it's just sort of the behavior on the employer side. So
And
yeah.
yeah. And something I always think about too is you can always personality is something that I think is really important in the hiring process.
Hmm.
Somebody who can vibe in your environment. You can always teach the job. If the
Yes.
person is smart and has their wits and has some experience, you can get them on board with whatever job they're applying for. But you
Hmm.
can't teach them to be a person,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
and a
right.
team player.
Yeah,
Um, but I mean, it doesn't apply to all jobs. Like as a nurse, you need to have your RN, but
sure.
you need to have, bedside manner and
Right.
personality,
You could be a
you
well
know,
qualified jerk. You know,
right,
that's not going to work.
exactly. So it's a matter of having that right person and somebody that is capable of learning too.
Yeah.
They're not just stuck at what they know.
Yeah. So let's keep this going. So how do the hiring side, the employer side, what tools are out there to help them, up the odds in their favor of making a good hire? Because we just identified you got to look for, the things that are the easiest to measure are probably the least important. You've done the job before, your salary matches, these sorts of things. The most important things are, do you fit here? These, so if they're going to do it themselves, what other tools are out there that you could recommend that help them get it, identify those, the more important characteristics?
Right. So I know a lot of hiring people or a lot of the HR people are posting on Indeed and they're posting on all these ZipRecruiter and everything, which it's great.
Hmm.
Um, but there's lots of other resources you can go through.
Hmm.
Um, but people use LinkedIn too. I mean, it's a great tool. It's a
Hmm.
great tool. It's the professional Facebook, I always say, because
Yeah.
it's all
Yeah.
about your connections and how you present yourself. But when you're hiring somebody, I think tools can be basic. I think you really need to prepare the right questions that you see fit for the job.
Hmm.
And be able to read their answers. If
Hmm.
somebody doesn't have the answer to your very simple question, they might not be prepared for your job, but some people just aren't good interviewers.
Yeah.
It's another thing. So make it a more casual setting for them to feel
Mhm.
comfortable to speak.
Yeah.
Um, and I think really when you're posting a job, be able to identify the key components of that job.
Hmm.
People, the first thing they're looking for is the salary.
Hmm.
And I think in the job description, you have all this education piece and all these attainable things that people have.
Hmm.
Just make it clear. I feel like job descriptions too on their end can be very either lacking or have too much information where you're like, I don't even know if I'm going to fit this job, but I'm going
Yeah.
to apply because the title is something I want.
Yeah.
So be a little bit clear on your end what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes a waitress thinks they're a nurse.
Right.
It's then they miss that piece where, oh, I need to be an RN.
Yeah.
Um, there's too many criteria in those job descriptions, I think,
Yeah.
that people miss because they don't read anymore. Everything is too simplified, is too, accessible. Apply
Hmm.
now, click. Oh, I'm not even qualified for that job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I think a matter of just the questions you ask need to be a little clearer. Um, people will always apply for jobs because they're always looking for a change, and I think
Hmm.
it's way more frequent now than ever.
Hmm.
Um, but I think just being able to identify those people by basic communication, I think
Yeah.
that's lacking in everything nowadays.
Yeah. So I have a couple of follow-up questions, but you jogged something when you said people don't read. I forget who told me this, and it was more than one person, but they would put in the instructions, either on Indeed or wherever, when you apply, and they would put this ridiculous thing you had to do, like include the following sentence in your reply. And it was something ridiculous. And the only reason it was there is because they wanted to see if the person who just applied actually read through what they were told
Yeah,
to do. And if they didn't have it, they blew them off. They're like, you can't even read. Like, you're
you
not even
didn't
reading.
get the detail, which is
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah. So a question about job descriptions. This was true when I was in corporate, and I hear it now. Job descriptions, like in corporate, you would read a job description. You're like, there's 5 jobs being described here.
Yeah.
It's like the kitchen sinks. Like, do you see that also in your world? And do you counsel your clients like what actually is this? Like,
Yeah, because a lot of times it's like, oh my God, like you want this person to do this, go to the sun, back to the moon, around the world, and then
mhm,
you're going to pay them $50,000. Are they really doing all that work, or you're
yeah.
just assisting with that work? Like
Or you're just indecisive and you haven't read your own job
right,
description to see what's
right, or
even
you're
in it.
not sure what you're hiring for.
Yeah.
You're looking for those three different kinds of people,
Hmm.
but is it really one job? Because
Hmm.
it's crazy. I
Hmm.
mean, I've had people just like, you're kidding me? Like, this is the job?
Yeah.
Like, I can do all of those things, and people want multifaceted jobs, but they also want to be paid for those jobs.
Yeah.
So I do counsel them to just, be very specific on what you're looking for because you're telling them one thing, but really they're doing 25 things.
Right.
It's
How often would you say, like, for every 10 clients you have, how often would you say you're having this discussion with them in one way or another?
I'm having an ongoing discussion with a lot of
But I mean,
clients.
on this topic, like, come on, man, let's make the job description clear and crisp,
I'd say like 40% of the time,
and that's
which is
pretty,
pretty high. I mean, it's almost
yeah.
half.
So 4 out of every 10, maybe this
Yeah,
is overstating it, themselves aren't clear what the job is they want done.
right.
Is that a fair way to re-say what you just said?
I would say so.
Yeah, that's not a good start to a hiring experience, is
No.
it?
And then they
Yeah.
say they can do it themselves. So,
Yeah. Well, then, so the other thing you were talking about is I took it as like the art of the question. I'm wondering if you would share just one question you ask that gives you, you know, more information than what are your credentials and do you like this salary? Like something that just sort of gets beneath the surface that tells you something insightful.
I think a question that's always been interesting in any interview I've had, and prepared someone for is that 5-year question. Okay, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Hmm.
You get a lot from that because you see if that person wants to grow within your company or they're seeing themselves, this is their starting block, they're starting here, and then
Hmm.
they go wherever. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to be a 5-year goal,
Hmm.
but I think, where do you see yourself? What is
Hmm.
your ideal job? Which I think is an interesting question to ask on an interview, because some people jump and say, this is my ideal job. Like, I really see myself here.
Is the
Okay,
follow-up,
great.
could you please explain that? Because we're not sure what we're hiring for,
What do
actually.
you, what, do you-
Maybe you
what does
can tell
that
us what
mean?
this ought to be because we're all over there. This is the freaking kitchen sink job.
Exactly. We're giving you everything,
Right.
and you
All of
can do
it?
this. But I think I see when people are given the chance and an open floor. I was never good at like a multiple choice question
Yeah. Okay.
because it's too straight and narrow. For
Okay.
me, I wanted to always write the essay.
Hmm.
Uh,
Wow, you're
so
unusual.
yeah, I know. So for people, because I could make any of those answers the right answer.
Yeah.
But for somebody who can get into their head and put it on paper and say, hey, this is where I see myself and how I can contribute to your team.
Hmm.
These are my skills, and I want to go here. At the
Hmm.
end of the day, I'd love to be your executive director. If you can see them creating a path on your team,
Hmm.
I think it's a great way to, you know, they have a vision, which you want
Yeah.
them to be part of your vision at the end of the day, or you don't, but
Okay.
you can see where they're going. You can
Yeah.
see how their skills line up. And also, it gives them a chance to show who they are a little bit too, with
Hmm.
their personality, with their background. And it's an open-ended question. It doesn't have a right or wrong,
Right.
which I think people get scared in an interview. Like, ooh, if I don't say this, I'm not going to get the job.
Yeah.
But it gives them the chance to really be who they are.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. And then, I suppose there are times, well, not suppose, there are times when practices or, companies should do it themselves, and there are times when they ought to bring in a recruiter. What's your sense on when does it make sense to bring in a recruiter?
So I think that there's no wrong time to bring in a recruiter. I think a
Hmm.
lot of times people are scared because of the fees.
Yeah.
Um,
Which I have
it's
a thought on that, but keep going.
but at the end of the day, you're hiring someone who's an outside resource who is looking at your position you're hiring in a different way.
Hmm.
In a way that they see you need it.
Hmm.
You have the idea in your mind, like, I need this person that has the degree in, accounting, and they have 3 years of experience, and that's what I need.
Hmm.
For me, I'm looking, okay, yes, of course, at the experience and the essential parts, which I think that is essential. And then a little bit deeper, how do they fit into your mission? How do they, you know, how will they communicate with you? How will they, work with your teammates? Um, so I think and for me, you're not paying me right away. You're paying
Hmm.
me after you hired someone and
Hmm.
after they've been there for a little while. So you're not really losing by hiring a recruiter in the beginning. Because they're just an extra pair of eyes that maybe gave you somebody you wouldn't have seen before,
Yeah.
or gave you somebody that you have seen and that reassures you, hey,
Yeah.
I am looking at the right kind of candidate. But also, a recruiter doesn't, someone like me, I'm giving you advice, I'm helping you no matter what.
Hmm.
Even if you aren't using me to hire someone, I'm happy to give you advice. I'm
Hmm.
happy to, look at your candidate and say, hey, this one I think really would fit your bill. It's just that outside piece. And I
Hmm.
think that's in anything you do, having somebody that has an outside, unbiased opinion
Yeah.
on your business
Yeah.
is a great person to have.
Yeah. I always think whenever I hear, because I've heard that too, oh, that's so expensive. And my head flips to, well, first of all, what should it cost? I mean, nobody really knows. It's too expensive. But then I also go to, all right, we need to hire somebody. We've got two ways to do it. We can bring in somebody from the outside like you, or we can try to do it ourselves. What's the fee? The fee is typically, I don't know, not typically, it's like the first month's salary or something. So you can quantify that. If we did it ourselves, how quickly would we blow through that number if we got it wrong?
Right,
And it probably doesn't take that long to do. Although, it's when you pay somebody something, the money just left the building, definitely. When you do it yourself, money doesn't ever really leave the building per se, but there's still a cost. And I just think like, just compare the two ways to get the job done.
right,
And, the last thing you want to hire somebody who you hope stays forever. They're
right,
probably hoping the same. And so with odds so bad in your favor, just compare the two. And if you say, all right, we really don't want to pay that money, we're going to do it ourselves. Okay, fine. But this whole anytime I hear that's too expensive. I mean, I just, well, what should it
right.
cost? I don't know. Well, then how do you know it's too expensive? Like, how would you do it otherwise?
Right.
What about those costs?
And
And nobody
exactly.
really
And if you
thinks like that,
hire,
but my head just goes straight there. I'm like, I got to get
yeah,
this thing done. What are my ways to get it done? Which one's the best? Cost, everything. Let's go.
and you hire the wrong person and they screw up whatever you need to do,
Yeah,
that costs time and money. I
it
mean,
does. It's disruptive,
which,
you know.
$10,000, if that, like, I'm just throwing a number out there,
Yeah.
you can make that back very quickly depending on what business you're in.
Hmm.
Um, and, you have somebody who helps you, you pay them to help you find the right person.
Hmm.
You're already at a good start.
Yeah.
You've already had somebody who's screened, whose, references are checked, you've gone through their resume, you've talked to them for a long time, you know them personally at some
Hmm.
point.
Hmm.
And they're going to do a good job. And if they don't do a good job, they're going to find you somebody else that can, and they're not
Hmm.
going to charge you again. They want to get it right too. That's their name on the
Yeah.
on,
At least they shouldn't. I know.
right.
And one of the biggest kitchen sink jobs I've ever seen is practice manager in a practice. I mean, I've
Yeah.
got one client, she's everything from the, bookkeeper to the plumber. And all that means is, when she hires, she just hasn't done it very often, doesn't have the time. And so now you're asking somebody in your practice who's not skilled in hiring to do the hiring. And on top of everything, it's like, what are the odds this is going to go well? I mean,
Right.
what are the
Right.
odds? You view an experimental treatment as experimental, maybe very careful, Dr. X. It's kind of the same, just like, please open your eyes. So,
Right.
you know,
Right.
do it
Well, the
yourself. If you got
HR,
somebody who's really good at it and you're hiring for a job you hire for often, you really feel like you got a good feeling like, yeah, we tend to get that right more often than not. Okay, fine. But other than that, just for the time savings, like,
right, right.
yeah.
Well, and HR people are the busiest people in the building, and hiring is like the last thing they're busy with.
Hmm.
And it's the most stressful. I mean, the paperwork alone after you've hired someone is
Yeah.
exhausting. So if you
Yeah.
can go through the initial interview process and cut out that 3 days, it's like a
Yeah.
miracle for them.
Yeah. And it's ironic, right? I mean, you ask any private practice owner, any business person, what's the most important thing about your practice or business that's led you to your success? And the people is going to be the answer more often than not. And yet, man, oh man, the hiring part is just
Yeah.
under prioritized, I'll say diplomatically.
Yes, for
you know,
sure.
Interesting. Yeah. It's really cool. I mean, I say this with a lot of guests, man, oh man, we could spend hours talking about this. There's so much to dig into, but we're more of the bite-sized variety of business advice here on Practice Care. So, two questions I ask every guest is kind of like closing questions. First one is this: anything you think I should have asked you, but I just didn't think to ask you?
I don't know if there's anything you miss, but I do think something very important when you're hiring
Hmm.
is personality. It has to connect with you, with your team.
Hmm.
If you have somebody that's just too to the left and you're all the way to the right, you need
Hmm.
somebody that can meet in the middle.
Hmm.
If you can't talk to that person every day and be open with that person, I think you know,
Hmm.
it's a no-go.
Yeah.
I just really think that that really has to be part of your process is, does that person's personality fit with you?
Hmm.
Do you feel like you can talk to that person and ask that person a question every day and they'll say
Yeah.
yes, or they'll give you a no with a justified answer?
Yeah.
I think you need somebody who can be active on your team,
Hmm.
but that you can talk to.
Yeah.
There's so many people that are afraid to speak up
Yeah.
nowadays, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And on that, do you encourage clients to like basically have more than one person in the practice or the business interview them, talk to them to get that kind of feel? Like when I was in corporate, we had to hire somebody. I had 3 or 4 people, and I said, here are the questions. Here's the topic I want you to interview for, but I need your read on them and their fit here. And when a few people are saying, yeah, they check the skills box and they check the feels good box on they could, then it was like, all right, we've got good comp. Like, do you do that too? Like, because everything you're saying that matters most is soft stuff, hard to interview for,
Right,
you know?
right. I feel like most of the people I work with, their companies are usually having 2 to 3 people. I
Hmm.
think the hardest part is getting them to commit to just having a conversation. I see a lot of times there's some pushback on interviewing someone as if they're already going to have the job. I don't want them to interview 800 people,
Hmm.
but I know this person can do a great job for you. Give
Hmm.
them a shot. It's
Hmm.
just a conversation.
Hmm.
Um, and it could be a great conversation that leads to the job,
Hmm.
or it's, you know what, this person didn't fit all our boxes, but I'm glad we talked to them because maybe they could be for a different job.
Hmm.
But I think the team part, having multiple people interview, I always encourage that, but it's usually already on the table because they
Hmm.
know more than one person there.
Yeah.
But I think uh, the just giving someone a shot. Like you hired me to
Hmm.
help. So take it.
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be everybody, but I
Right.
think I've gone through enough people. I think this person is great,
Yeah.
and I need you to just give them a shot.
Yeah.
Give them a call so you don't waste your time. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be in the office, but just ask those questions with your teammates.
Sure. Sure. Okay, good. The other wrap up question I ask every guest is, all right, we've caught a listener's attention. They want to improve their hiring success rate, but they just don't know where to start. They know the way they've done it. They don't know what to do. They don't do it that often for whatever the reason. And they want to get better, but they just don't know where to start. So, is there one or two super simple practical things you'd recommend they do as soon as they're done listening to this to get started?
When you get a resume, you should just narrow down the top 3 things in your mind that you want to hire for,
Hmm.
and then look at the resume. Because sometimes those resumes are an overload and 17
Hmm.
long. Pick out those 3 key components that you're really looking for
Hmm.
and kind of scan the resume and see if they have any of that.
Mm.
Um, and I would give every not don't give every candidate a call, but if it jumps out at you for a reason, give them a call.
Okay.
Because obviously that person sparked your interest for something.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And you never
wonder,
know.
you never know. Yeah. I wonder about take a look at any job descriptions you have and just with fresh eyes or ask somebody else, maybe in the practice, to say,
Right. You
how
narrow it
many of our
down.
jobs do you see described in this?
Right.
And if the answer is more than, I guess, ideally one, then, and look, you're right. You said it earlier. Everybody wants to be stretch and flexible. And of course, the smaller the business, the more you need to do that. But unless the job description is jack of all trades, we don't know what you're doing any day.
Right.
There's probably a primary purpose you're hiring somebody, a primary role more than the other ones.
Right.
Um, just
E-
that should stand out. That should
Right.
be the
Well, and
primary.
everybody's willing to go above and beyond if they love where they're working.
Sure,
Everybody's willing to put their
sure.
hands in, but they need to know the 5 main things they're going to do in their job, not the 30.
Yes. At least the ones you're going to hold them accountable for, right? I mean, that's yeah,
Right.
yeah. So Yes, nobody wants to have the "I told you so" conversation where the candidate comes, "But look at your job description that you hired me for.
Right.
There's
I'm doing
25
everything.
things in here and they all read identically prioritized." So that's what I was trying to get done. Anyway, yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, good point. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you for coming on. It's not an easy topic, but it's an important topic. So thank you for demystifying some of it for us here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was
Yes,
fun.
and it's good to see you again on this fun, cool play date anyway. So
Yeah,
big victories all
absolutely.
around. And you gave us contact information for you. We're going to get that into the show notes for your episode so that anybody who wants to get a hold of you now has another way to find you.
Yeah.
A couple of points before we wrap up. Yes. First, if you're someone like Lindsay or I and you serve private practice owners, and you've got some expertise to share, or if you're a private practice owner yourself and you've figured out some stuff on the business side of private practice that you think your colleagues would benefit from, either way, please, we want you to come on Practice Care and share your knowledge with the world. In Lindsay's episode show notes and every episode show notes, there's a link, a couple of clicks. It's super easy. Just tell us what's on your mind and we'll get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, if you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to Practice Care. We're super easy to find: Apple, Spotify, Amazon, pretty much every player and platform. We drop a new episode every week, and the easiest way to stay up to date is to subscribe. Thanks very much. Until next time. Morning. Hang on one second.